Hello, everyone. My name is Yegonsi. I'm the executive director here at Scott Gulat. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization serving the Oneida community, and we focus on restoring community wellness through Oneida language and culture education, outreach, and advocacy. And so today we are back for more language lessons, foundational language lessons, and we are going to move right along into learning about the O-stem verb conjugations. So if you're following along in this series, I've done videos on the A-stem verb conjugations, the C-stem verb conjugations, and now we're going to do the O-stem verb conjugations. And so sometimes we call this Unit 7 if you take classes of ours or learned through the curriculum that was established by the Oneida Language Department. And this is the curriculum we use because these are foundational aspects of our language. So basically, when we learn the STEM pronoun patterning system and the STEM pronoun verb conjugations, it is a window into understanding the language entirely. And so this is critical information. It's foundational information if you want to learn Oneida and develop proficiency specifically, striving towards speakership. This is the pathway to do so. And so these are just foundational components of our language. They're structured really well in the Oneota Aga Jinidwa Wanoda curriculum established by the Oneida Language Department. And so these are lessons that are coordinating lectures that go along with each of those units. So sometimes we call it Unit 7. But otherwise, it's known as O-stem verb conjugations. So we're going to move right along here today. I've shown these initial slides here in the last few videos, but I just like to reiterate, where we are at in the language learning journey. And so, learning verb conjugations is a fundamental skill. It's building a foundation within the first 1 to 5 years of learning language. Really, you're focused on building a very strong skill set in fundamentals of Oneida. So that includes the sound practice, it includes understanding the pronoun patterning system and the stems, the 8 stem categories of the Oneida language, learning verb conjugations, developing comprehensions through audio stories, and also doing transcribing through written stories. And so, really, you're building on skills of listening, comprehension, speaking, recognizing words and sounds. And so, that transitions into a later phase. The latter half of those 5 years, the years 3 to 5, into talking, into developing speech. And so, this is where language acquisition takes place and understanding. And now these time frames are not rigid by any means because the more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. And so the more you study, the faster you will develop your proficiency. But if you are, dedicating maybe 10 minutes a week, which is totally fine, it will be a little bit slower. And so it is all you determine your pace. And so this is just kind of like a general guideline to developing, I suppose you could say fluency, but I would prefer proficiency because it's more of a measurable scale. And so um, if you're following along in the book, the Onayata Aga Jinidwa Wanoda book, the curriculum, it is a combined curriculum of a number of fundamental components. The latter half of that book is what we call Unit 6, 7, and 8. And so in Unit 7, you learn the tense conjugations. And so this is one aspect of that Unit 7. And that is what we will explore in this video today. So like I had mentioned, years 1 through 5 are really developing a foundation of Unggohotne or the Oneida language. And so understanding verb tense changes for the 8 stem categories in Oneida is kind of like the end of the first year, I suppose you could say, in understanding kind of like the timeline of the journey. And so this is really a window into everything else because everything truly flows from the stems and the verb conjugations of each of those stems. And So this is really critical information within that first year to develop. And you can check out the rest of the slide just to kind of see like what would be next. But for this video, I'm just going to stick to the verb conjugation. So just to kind of support your language learning journey, swadahosios means listen carefully. And so I would really encourage you to take notes when needed. Um, and this is a PowerPoint I used to use when I taught high school, so that's why it's a students and to be in class. But it is really important if you do learn language with someone or a mentor or class. It is really, attendance is incredibly important because when you're there and you're learning, that you the more you get out of it. If you're not there, you're not learning unless you're studying on your own. But it is really important. Attendance does correlate to your success in the language. So that is really critical. I think when we look at language revitalization as a whole, we have a number of curriculums, we have a lot of documentation and resources, but what do we really need? The human resources. We need the speakers, we need the people to do it. And we really have to look inward at our own behaviors and see how are we showing up for language. Our language has shown up for us and it does take care of us. And now we need to be in relationship with the language, respect it, and make sure that we are in class, that we're on time, that we're paying attention, and we're prepared. And so that's really critical. Is really looking inward. That's part of the language learning journey to showing up for language. So that's why attendance is really important. So I'm glad you're all here listening to this recording to support your language learning journey. The other thing that I always encourage students is we do not support perfectionism. So perfectionism is a characteristic of what we call white supremacy culture, colonial culture. Those are colonial norms. They are colonial behaviors. That is a trap. It is a trap of assimilation. And really, our culture embraces mistakes. We embrace that as a teaching, as a way to learn something. And that's truly how we learn and grow. And so it can be challenging in language learning spaces because we are facing, a really challenging history with language loss and also the impacts of historical trauma. And then also, the fear of making mistakes, but really that shows that we're human. So I really encourage people to know that it's okay to make mistakes. This is how we learn. This is how we grow. This is how we show we're human. We are all human at the end of the day. We are not robots. We are not machines. We are not an army. So we are people. We are people reclaiming our language. And so it is important that we establish basics of wellness in language spaces. Wellness and safety, those things are very, very important. So the most important part is to try. One is to show up, and two is to try. If you don't do either of those, then it's going to be much more challenging to learn language. But if you do those, and even if you make mistakes and it takes a while, you're still working at it, and it's more than not doing it. So it is just good encouragement to think about when you kind of feel down in this in learning language. So just all of that aside, just wanting to encourage you because I do know that even topics like the O stem verb conjugations can feel like a lot of information, and it's like, what did I even learn? But keep trying, keep showing up, keep studying, um, and that will support you in your journey. So the other thing is I would really encourage you to focus, listen, and pay attention closely to the unit because there's a lot of small patterns. There's a lot of small aspects of verb conjugations that are really important. And also because what we learn in this unit builds on the next unit. Every single thing in our language is totally interconnected and totally related. That is the unique beauty of our language is it's based on a pattern and it's the verb stems that our language is truly based on. And so when we learn those, it is much easier, much more efficient, and much more sustainable to learn any other aspect in our language. So, just to briefly give a background, I do this at the beginning of every single verb conjugation lecture to give you a background in pronouns because we learned pronouns in previous lectures. previous recordings. And so I always use a lot of these terms. I like to refresh our memory on the terms that I'm using because I will say pronouns, I will say prefixes. So I just want to ground ourselves to make sure we all know and understand what those terms mean. So what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. It is she, it, him, them, we, they, us, me, you. Those are words that replace a noun, a pronoun. And remember, a noun is a person, place, or a thing. And so these pronouns can be persons or people. And so that is what pronouns are. And we have an entire patterning system of pronouns in the Oneida language that are based on a pretty predictable pattern, but they change slightly depending on the stem. And this is really what the core of our language is. If you're not aware of the pronouns and the patterning system and the stems, it will be very hard to sustainably learn Oneida language with s- in a like a long-term sustainable way, I suppose you could say. Um, that isn't necessarily based in memorization. Memorization is not a sustainable way to learn language because it doesn't allow for fluidity. The way I'm speaking right now is just off the top of my head, allowing thoughts to come through my mouth and being shared with you all. And we want language to work the same way. So when we say we want to develop speakers and develop proficiency, that's exactly what we mean, is being able to have fluidity. In the language, being able to have impromptu speech, comprehending language, being able to speak language in one breath. And so learning the pronoun patterning system is the way to do that. Um, and it seems like a lot because there's a lot of pronouns, but they're all based on a very simple, predictable pattern. So it makes it much more easier to learn them. Pronouns. So our pronouns are prefixes. So what does that mean? Prefixes are something that is placed before the beginning of a word. Sometimes we say it's before the beginning of a verb root or a stem. Those words are interchangeable, but it's just the beginning. Just remember that the prefixes, it's at the beginning, okay? The beginning of a verb root. And I'll show you on the next slide what that looks like. But in our verb changes or our word changes, the pronouns are prefixes. There's other prefixes that go before the pronouns, but that we'll look at a little bit later in this lecture. So I just want you to know that the pronouns are always prefixes. Um, and they go before a verb root. So why are stems important? I've mentioned a few different reasons already why they're important, but they're also important because, most simply put, they reference and indicate who specifically the word is referring to. Who are we talking about? If we say all these words, like what are we saying? Who are we talking about? That's really important. So like a really simple example I always use is study. Study is a really common command a lot of people know. And it means sit, but it means specifically you sit. And the za in sadi means you. And so that is who we're talking about. The za is the pronoun actually for you in the A stem. And so when we say za, it means you sit. So we know who we're talking about. Um, when I say that statement, study. So that's why STEM pronouns are really important because they indicate who we're talking about. They help us develop comprehension. So where do STEM pronouns go? I mentioned this already, but they're prefixes. Pronouns are prefixes. It means that they always go on the beginning of a verb, or specifically a word or verb root. I use kind of all those terms interchangeably. Um, and they're attached to the verb root. And so a real simple example is this word ungwehu. So if you're following along in this lecture series, there was a unit that we call the three races of people, and we present very simple verb roots so that you can learn how to attach pronouns to verb roots and make very simple conjugations. And ungwehue was one of those verb roots. It means to be Oneida. And if you want to say I'm Oneida, you would take the pronoun because ungwehu is a you stem verb, so you have to use you stem pronouns. Um, you take the you stem pronoun for me, gu, attach it to the beginning of the verb root, specifically in this case, because it's a vowel stem, it means that the pronoun replaces the first vowel. Gu replaces the U in ungwe hu. You're left with gungwe hu. I am Oneida or I'm Oneida. And so that is an example of the pronoun that operates as a prefix goes at the beginning of the verb root, just to show you. And so let's move on here. Just to recap, all stems they have subjective and objective sides. So if you've learned these changes and been following along in the recordings, previous videos taught you the A, C, O, and the U stems. Later videos will teach you the fake E, the I, and the caret stems because there's 8 total. Every single stem in our language has 2 sides. One is called the subjective, the other is called the objective. And basically, it sounds just like that. Subjective centers the subject, and the objective is kind of decentering the subject, so to speak. So basically, the subjective, when you say me, you're basically saying me to it. In the objective, you're basically saying it to me. So when we do the English translations, we don't put that there because we just focus on the subjects, but you are basically saying that because everything is relational in our language. In a way, it is connected to everything else, and that's the unique nature of the Oneida language is how um, relationality and kinship is deeply embedded in the language and specifically the pronoun patterning system and specifically the verbs. It makes it quite unique and highly sophisticated in that way. So, in the Oneida language, though, like I mentioned, just to kind of sum up, all stems have a subjective and objective side. They have different pronouns on each of those sides, but the meanings of those pronouns stay the same. So that's important to note. Um, so the subjective and objective, what is that really? They're basically present like tenses. They're found in every stem. So if you look on the chart here below, the subjective usually represents habitual actions, things that are happening all the time. Sometimes we like to call the subjective the serial, and we have a little joke in our language, amongst our language people. We say the subjective is AKA the serial killer. And we say that because it emphasizes this repetitiveness, the habitual action, doing it all the time. That gives you insight into how the subjective is used, what it means, how to use it appropriately, and also how to translate it. And so yes, are always specific exceptions for verbs. That is quite normal in languages and Oneida language. Um, so sometimes there's no serial meaning of a verb that happens, like it's not a habitual action or repetitive action. And so sometimes that means the subjective will actually be the present. It will be happening right now, like I'm walking or something like that. Versus I'm a walker. Because a walker doesn't mean you're walking right now. It just means that's what you do all the time. I'm a person that walks, goes for walks, something like that. But it's important to note the highlighted portions in red. So going to the objective generally, more often than not, represents things happening in the moment. Um, like it's raining, or I'm sad, or I'm happy, things like that. Generally, emotions are usually objective. And I always say it's really important to understand the context of emotions, emotions generally being in the objective sides of verbs, are talking about that thing to me, essentially. And so it actually is really unique because it doesn't mean that those emotions are our identity. It means that they are just kind of like passing through us. And so I think that's really critical to the kind of like behavioral and psychological demeanor of Indigenous people, which is based generally on these ideas of peace, but it means also an idea of groundedness. So it's not to say that we aren't emotionless. We definitely experience emotions, but we're very grounded, and so we don't let those emotions take the wheel, so to speak. So when you learn language, you learn a lot more about different aspects of our way of life, and so that's why also why language is important. So And if you know me and you watch these videos, you know I like to add little teachings in here like that, or tangents, I suppose you could say. But it's important because they're good examples of how objective is used, how to understand this in reality. And so at the beginning stages, though, right now we can kind of stick to the chart. And so objective really means things like happening in the moment, but it can also represent a recent past tense, like maybe you just got a haircut. I just got this haircut, or I just drove. Like, it can represent a very recent past tense, like it just happened. There's always special exceptions, so just FYI, this is always occurs in our language. Um, and just to note on the side, the right now present tense is generally objective. So generally when you're talking about things right now, it's usually objective. But if there's no habitual action of a verb, then the subjective will represent things happening right now, and the objective will take on a recent past tense. So the right now, like present tense, things happening right now, between the subjective and objective does sometimes jump around. It depends on the verb. It always depends on the verb. So I wouldn't say that this table is generally the rule of thumb. It is just a guideline. The verb dictates what is happening right now. Is it on the subjective side or is it on the objective side? So there is guidelines always, and so I teach you those, but always I would always encourage people to not be so rigid in the guidelines in that make room for I guess some of the ambiguity and sometimes the unique exceptions of the language because the language is its own spiritual entity and it will behave and act the way it does. And so we are not necessarily to place the rigidness on the language, but instead let the language teach us. And so that's the cool thing. Okay, let's move on. So patterns in the meaning chart. So I mentioned all the stem pronouns of every single stem in the language. They follow the same meaning chart. And the meanings are based in columns. So the first, second, and third column, it's always by the number of subjects. And it's also related across in rows depending on how each of those pronouns are related. So just to kind of quickly run through the chart, starting at the top left with the singular subjects, it goes me, you, him, her, she, or it. And then it jumps to the second column. These are two subjects, so it's me and you, which is like a we inclusive because I'm talking about me and you. You two is just exclusive. I'm saying you two. Two males. It could also include a mixed group, so it could be a male and a female. Sometimes we call it them. Two females. It's always strictly females when we talk about the females, and that is also them. And then we also have this last one is me and one other person. And this is also we, but it's a we exclusive. So it's not you, it's me and this other person. We're going to do something versus me and you who are going to do something. So that's the difference. The third column is all of us. So this is every single person that's included in the statement. Second one in the third column, all of you or you all. The third one, three or more males, could be a mixed group of males and females. We also call that them. The fourth one is three or more females. This is them, but it's just females, no males. And then the last one is me and two or more other people. So this is a we exclusive. And it is related across in rows. If we look at the first row, we know that me, I'm included in every single one of these subject groups. So it's inclusive, me and you, all of us. The second one is exclusive. I am not included in any of those. It's exclusive. You two, or all of you. The third one is males, very simple. Fourth one is females, and then the last one doesn't really have a pattern outside of the second and third column, which are related. But other than that, it doesn't have a pattern, so we just call it other. So O stem tense changes. We're going to work on learning the tense changes for the O stem with this root word ochu, ochu. So going way back to the sound practice, TSHY, that combination, when you see that combination in verbs or words, it makes a CH sound, ochu. Okay, so that's how you say the verb root. This is why the sound practice is really important because it helps to build your skills to prepare you to pronounce the verb conjugations. And so we're going to work with verb conjugations. For ochu, we're going to use subjective and objective pronouns, and we're also going to master the appropriate prefixes and suffixes to those different changes. and then also determine and translate their meanings. And so the meaning chart applies to every single tense because that gives us our subjects who we're talking about, but it's going to be enhanced and expanded because now we are adding the verb meaning, then the tense meaning. So this will create an entire thought and a sentence for us. So the changes that we're going to go through, or the conjugations, are going to be the subjective or the serial, the past tense, the future tense, the should, could, or would tense, and the objective. So if you've been learning along with the previous A and C stem tense changes, this shouldn't be like super new information. It's just new because it's an O stem, but you should be familiar with the prefixes to tense changes, especially in the past, the future, and the should, could, or would. So let's do a quick review of our O stem subjective and objective pronouns. Remember in the O stem, this is a nice fancy little stem because it all ends in an O. So this helps us. But the pronouns in the subjective go as follows. I always start in the upper left corner and go down in columns and then go to the second column and the third column. So you can follow along with me. If you want to pronounce them on your end, that would be great because then you can get some pronunciation practice. So the first one is go. Remember, that is me. Then we have zo, which is you. Lo, which is him. Yago, which is her. Yo, which is she or it. No, you, me and you. Snow, you two. No, two males. Gno, two females. Yagno, me and someone. Dio, all of us. Joe, you all. Lano, three or more males. Guno, three or more females. And Yagyo, me and two or more others. So just back to back, this whole chart is go, zo, lo, yago, yo. No, snow, no, gno, yagno. Dio, jo, lano, guno, yagyo. And then we have the objectives. So I'm not going to do all the meanings on this one. Same meanings, just different pronouns. We have wago, zo, lao, yagao, yao, yungno, snow, lono, yono, yungno, yungyo, jo, lono, yono, yungyo. Okay, so let's move on. O stem tense changes. The third root we're going to learn here is for the O stem. This is a subjective verb, a subjective word. What does that mean? Means that the tenses of the past, future, and should, could, or would tense, they are all going to use subjective pronouns of the O stem in conjunction with the prefixes of that tense for the O stem. So the O stem, the objective changes, sorry for that, O stem, those are obviously going to use objective pronouns. So, and they're also going to have unique suffix endings depending on the stem. So let's go to the 5 sets of changes, the breakdown for all those tense changes. So the subjective is known as the serial. This can represent things happening right now. It can also represent things habitually happening or repetitively happening. The subjective is going to use subjective pronouns and it's going to have its own ending. So just note the yellow arrow to the right of the screen. The past, future, and should, could, or would tense, they're all highlighted in purple because they share something in common, that they will all share the same ending. That's really important. They use different prefixes, tense prefixes. They all use subjective pronouns, and they all share the same ending. So there's some differences, but there is also some commonalities. So just be aware of each of those. Past tense, things representing or happening in the past. Future tense, things that will or have yet to happen. The should, could, or would tense is a tense unique to our language. It talks about things that could or should or would happen, hence should, could, or would tense. Linguistically, they call this tense something else, but I like to use it just because these are community classes and this was like a university linguistics program, we would use those terms, but this is a community program. So it's important that we use accessible terminology for community to help them understand and reclaim their language in a way that is meant for them. So that is why I use these types of terms. Objective thing represents things happening right now or things that just have happened. So if we look at the yellow arrow, it says the objective will have or use objective pronouns and it will have its own ending. So how many endings do we have total for all of the 5 sets? You can just share it on your end and I will share it here shortly. We have three. There's only three endings. Out of all these five sets, there's only three endings. So that's important because it's not a lot. Even though there's a lot of verb conjugations, it's only three endings. So again, patterns. So if we look at our O stem root word or verb root, ochu, what does ochu mean? It means to pull it out. A lot of times they use this. I've seen it used like with weeding and like grass. And a lot of times it's combined with the word for grass, and so it's like to pull weeds. It's kind of what it means. So pulling something out. It generally. This is the very simple version of the verb, but that's what it means. So ochu. What do you notice about the root word? Um, well, we see that it starts with an O. It means that it's an O stem. So whatever the first letter is, that will tell you what stem it is. It starts with an O, it's an O stem. We see that there's a dash before the O and a dash after the U. That means that something is going to go there. So it means the prefix is gonna go by this dash, and that there's going to be an ending here, a suffix ending that goes by this dash. And so verb roots, they just exist as the infinitive when you use the dictionary or dictionary resources. That's all that's going to show up is verb roots, and then maybe some examples of conjugations, but not all of them. The job is for you to do the conjugations and know them. And like a lot of times, beginner learners, we write them out, but eventually it's just all up in here. So, um, it's just like English. It's just like English. You just naturally know how to conjugate verbs because it's just a part of your vocabulary. And so the same is with language, is that's where we want to strive to get, is to just have natural conversation in that way. Okay. So observations of Ochu I already mentioned. It starts with an O, which is a vowel. It means it's the O stem. The dashes at the beginning and the end mean that something's going to be placed at the beginning or at the end. Just to emphasize, I mentioned this word suffix. Suffix is something that is placed at the end of the word. Suffix means end, near the end of. And so our language has patterns of endings that also coincide with the tense changes. And so sometimes I call them endings, sometimes I call them suffixes. It's essentially the same thing. So the subjective always has its own changes. The three tenses, past, future, should, could, or would, they're categorized together because they have and share the same ending. So I know I sound like a dead horse saying this, but it's because it's important. If I'm saying it more than once, I'll listen up because it's important. And um, just to reiterate that this is key critical information. The objective is always going to have its own changes and its own ending specifically. So verbs make up almost all of the Oneida language. Verb or word changes. Um, the Oneida language is pretty much entirely verbs. I would say like 90%. Even nouns are derived from verbs. So it's not to say that we don't have nouns, but the nouns are also verbs. They're verb roots. So we just make them into nouns. But the core of Oneida is verbs. It's all verbs. It's a language of action. So let's move on here. There is a total amount of 75 verb changes for this one root word ochu. So I think that's pretty cool because we can take one verb root and change it all these different ways. Very, very sophisticated. So, um, let's review the rule for vowel stem conjugations. We learned this when you learned the three races of people um, a while back in previous recordings. So what is the rule? O is a vowel, so it's going to follow the vowel stem, how we put pronouns and attach them to verb roots. So in vowel stems, the stem pronoun replaces the beginning vowel letter in the matching stem root word. I'm going to show you an example. This includes tense changes, okay? This includes the U, and the O stems. Those are all verbs, or sorry, vowel stems. It will later include the true E stem, the I, and the caret stem. It doesn't include the C stem or the fake E. C stem is a consonant stem, that's why. Fake E works like a consonant stem. It's not a consonant stem, but it operates like it. Um, but be aware of ending changes later on. So, well, in this unit, we talk about endings. So, but always again to emphasize that stem pronouns, they have to match the same stem root word. This applies to any stem. So that means that O stem pronouns, subjective or objective, only go with O stem root words. So you can't put A stem pronouns with a C stem root word. That's not how it works. You can't put C stem pronouns with the O stem verb. That's not how it works. It has to match. It always has to match. Seems like a really simple thing, but you would be surprised at um, the errors that come up in this type of understanding. So, um, it's a demonstration of knowledge as well. So when we think about if we are familiar with language, we can demonstrate that we're familiar with language because we understand how the language functions and how it is arranged, and that is how it's arranged. So to keep it in mind, another thing to be very aware of. So the vowel stem rules applies to the O stem because the O is a vowel stem. Again, the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and the caret. And the pronouns, basically, the rule again was the pronouns replace the beginning vowel letter of the root word. Okay, so let's start with the first set here. We have the subjective, or the serial for ochu to pull it out. So I'm going to go through the changes, then I'm going to highlight the pronouns, color code them, the root and the ending, and then give you the translations. So subjective and objective are pretty easy. It's what we're really going to take time on is the tenses, the past, future, should, could, would tense. So we have the changes. I'm just going to go through all of them, and you can practice pronouncing them on your own as well. The first one is go choose. And then we have zochus, lochus, yagochus, yochus, nochus, snochus, nochus, gnochus, yagnochus, diochus, jochus, lanochus, gunochus, and then yagyochus. So if you can kind of look at, do you see the pronouns? Can you guess what the ending is? I'm going to show you here on the screen. Let's take a closer look at the pronouns and the endings. I have the subjective pronouns color-coded in red. I have the root word color-coded in the black, and then the ending is color-coded in blue. Now, yes, is the root O-T-S-H-Y-U? Yes. It is important to know that sometimes letters are shared between the beginning and the end. And so OTSHYU is still there. It's just partially shared also with the pronoun, and it's partially shared with the ending. So it's still there. The main part of the root without the vowels is still there. Okay. So just to be like, well, it doesn't exactly say the OTSHYU. It's because it is still there. It's just shared with the pronoun and then the ending. So I just wanted to specifically highlight the pronoun though, and then also the ending so you can see those pieces together. Okay, so we have our pronoun in red, our root in black, and then our ending in blue. So, oftentimes the suffix endings include the last vowel of the root word. So, the ending, you could essentially say it as just the S. That's fine. You can also say it's US. It's not, neither of those are correct or incorrect. It's just understanding the placement and the aspects of the whole verb root. And so basically the verb root, the serial ending is us or just est. Either of those are fine. Um, so let's look at the meanings here. So go choose means, well, go means me. What am I doing? I'm pulling it out because in this case, in this verb, that's happening right now. Okay. So this is a good example of a verb that in the subjective, the case of the subjective, it means it's happening right now. So go choose, I'm pulling it out. Zochus, you are pulling it out. Maybe you're weeding or something like that. Um, Lochus, he's pulling it out. Yogochus, she's pulling it out. Yochus, it's pulling it out. Could be an older she or older female as well. No choose, me and you are pulling it out. Snow choose, you two are pulling it out. No choose, they are pulling it out. Who? The two males or a mixed group of male and a female. Gnochus, they're pulling it out, the two females. Yagnochus, me and somebody are pulling it out. Diochus, all of us are pulling it out. Jochus, you all are pulling it out. Lanochus, they are pulling it out. Gunochus, they are pulling it out, the three or more females. And then we have Yagyochus, me and two or more others are pulling it out. And so those are the changes, the serial subjective changes for Ochu. Pretty simple, pronoun, root, ending, and then your meanings. Now let's go to the past tense. This is going to have the most changes out of all of the tense changes. Ochu. I'm just going to pronounce them here on this first slide, and then we'll look at all the different pieces of the word. I get my color coding out, and then we'll do patterns in the prefixes and pronouns, and then the translations. Okay, so just pay attention to what you see. What is the ending? Where's the pronoun? Maybe can you guess the meaning? And then also practice pronunciation as I go through them. So the first one is what goch. That is the word with the whispered ending. The full word, pronouncing the I, because the I is whispered, what gochi. Okay. So I only do the first one, saying the full word. And then after that, I just do the word with the whispered ending. So wasoch, wahloch, waagoch, waoch, wadenoch, wasnoch, wachnoch, wagnoch, waagnoch, wadioch, wajoch, wahanoch, wagunoch, waagyoch. And so those are the changes for the past tense. So let's go through the prefixes, the pronouns, the root, and then the ending. So you can see the different color coding on the screen here. In the pink, this is the past tense prefix. The red is the subjective pronoun. The black is the root word. Remember, that's combined with the O. And well, what happened to the YU? Sometimes it changes to an I, and that's why we have the I as the ending. So this isn't anything you need to be very concerned with, but it is important just to kind of like be aware of, just because it is patterns later on down the road of understanding language and how sometimes verbs change like that. But for now, you can just understand that as the ending. So that is what is highlighted in blue is the past tense ending. So we have wa, 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 wa for all of the prefixes for the past tense in the first column. And then we have way, wa, wa, wa in the second column as the tense prefix. And then the third column, we have way, wa, wa, wa. And note the slight changes to some of the pronouns in red. And then the ending. So let's talk about the past tense characteristics here specifically without doing the full word. So for subjective pronouns, the past tense is going to have additional prefixes to the pronouns because this wa or way is what identifies the past tense. It's one part that identifies the past tense. Another part is the ending, but you can't do it just based on the ending alone because that ending is shared with the future and the should, could, or would. So you also have to have another indicator at the beginning to indicate what tense it is. And that is why the past tense is typically identified with either a wa or a way prefix. And so the ending for this set is the I. So how do you get your verb? You get your past tense prefix. This is kind of like the equation to build your verb. You have your past tense prefix, which is either wa or way. You have your pronoun like go, zo, lo. You have your root word, ochu, and then you have your ending, which is I. And that, combining all that together, creates your past tense subjective word change. So the past tense prefixes are listed here. Wa, way, wa, way, wa. So nothing incredibly new if you've been following along the A and the C stem, but I think it's important to actually specifically to look at the patterns. So these are patterns in regards to the past tense prefixes associated on our meaning chart. And so past tense has some patterns that you just kind of have to learn as is, but there are a few unique ones that don't really fall into the pattern. So you kind of like the past tense has the most changes that are kind of new to really practice and study. So you'll notice that there's some changes that are WA caret, there's some that are WAH, there's some that are just WA, there's some that are WE drag. So again, it's still either indicated by a wa or a way. In the upper corner of the chart is what I like to call a postage stamp pattern. Me and you two, all of us, and you all are always WE drag. The female row is always WA glottal, as well as the bottom WA glottal. So I think that that's important, just to be aware of that. That is the change for the past tense, O stem past tense prefix patterns. Um, so now that we know the prefixes, um, what about the pronouns? So pronouns, again, we're using O stem subjective pronouns, go, zo, okay, those are the same. Lo, this actually stays in L for the U and the O stem for the singular male, okay, not for the three or more males, but for the singular male. This is different than what we've learned in the A and the C stem, because we knew in those stems that the L's changes to H's, but not in the O stem and the U stem. It stays in L. And oftentimes this is for pronunciation purposes. So the Y's, though, like in the next pronoun, what drops off. So we have yago, the Y drops off. It says the Y in yay, but it actually is supposed to be yago. That's just a C stem example. But it's the same similarity. So the Y in yago, it drops off and it just changes to ugo. Same thing for yo. The Y drops off and it's simply just an O. Same for yagno. It becomes ugno. And then yagyo becomes ugyo. And then the last one is this pronoun for three or more males, which is lano. The L changes to an H and it becomes hano. Okay, so this is where our changes come in. We have wa goch, wa gochi, wa soch, wa loch, wa agoch, wa och, wade noch, we snoch, wa noch, wa ganoch, wa agnoch, we dioch, we joch, wa hanoch, wa gunoch, and wa agyoch. So, what does it mean? It's past tense. So, wa goch, wa gochi, I pulled it out. Wa soch, you pulled it out. It happened in the past. You did it. Okay, this is the past tense. And the subjects, him, wahloch, he pulled it out. Wa'agoch, she pulled it out. Wa'och, it pulled it out. So if you want, you can pause it just to read the rest of the translations for the rest of the chart. But I will continue to move on to the future. So we're about halfway through our subjective changes here. I'm just going to go through the changes and then we'll talk about the prefix patterns and the translations here shortly. So again, I will do the first one with both the full pronunciation and the whispered ending, and then the rest of them with just the whispered ending. So ungoch, or the full word is ungochi. On soch, on loch, on yogoch, on yoch, on noch, on snoch, on hnoch, on gnoch, on yognoch, on dioch, on joch, on hanoch, on gnoch, on yogyoch. Okay, so let's look at the prefixes, pronouns, root word, and the ending. So we have the pink. The pink is our indicator of the tense prefix. The future tense is always indicated by a caret. Subjective pronoun is in red. The black is the root word. Again, there's some combining here between the O and the I. And then the ending is just the blue. So we have ungoch, on caret. That's our future. On is like when you hear that, that's the future. Okay, they're saying they will do something. Ungoch, go. Oh, that's me in the O stem. Okay, what are they doing? And then the rest of the verb ungoch, I will pull it out. So that is the changes. So we can see everything. I would recommend and encourage you to pause this to study. This is like an important part to help you study the changes for the prefixes. But I'm going to go to the next slide just so you can see what the future tense prefixes are and the patterns. So for subjective verbs, the future tense will have additional prefixes to the pronouns. The future tense is always identified with a caret. And the ending for this is the I. But basically, how do you get your future tense verb? You have your tense prefix, which is the caret. You have your root word, like go, and then you have your root, the och, and then you have your ending, which is the I. And putting all that together is your one word. It creates your future tense verb conjugation. Okay. So again, to reiterate, past, future, should, could, would have the same ending. Okay. So we know that every single change has a caret, but a couple of them have a caret H. So you, him, and two males, those ones have caret H. And that's mostly for pronunciation. So just FYI. So what happens with our pronouns? We learned the future tense prefixes. Now, what about the pronouns? Well, all the pronouns pretty much stay the same except three or more males. So no changes to the other pronouns, but if we look at three or more males, lano, the L changes to an H and it becomes hano or hanoch. So really simple. It's just one of these small, slight changes. And we end up with our translations here. We have ochu, future tense, ungoch, ungochi, I will pull it out. Unsoch, you will pull it out. Unhloch, he will pull it out. On Yagoch, she will pull it out. On Yoch, it will pull it out. And then so on. You can pause the rest to read the rest of the translations. These are pretty simple and but just based on patterns. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you kind of get the picture. So, encouraging you to just pause and read the rest of the translations, or if you want to challenge yourself to um, use one of these previous slides and just see if you can guess the translations. That helps you to develop some transcribing skills. When I introduce this information initially, I give you kind of everything straight up. And then when we do new verb conjugations, I ask for you to give me the changes. And so that is one way you can kind of help to develop your study skills in the language if you're a self-directed learner or an independent learner using these videos or something online, that's totally fine. These are just suggestions to help you develop that. Okay, let's do the last of the three tense changes. So this is the should, could, or would tense. I'm going to go through the pronunciation just for the table alone, the chart by itself, and then we'll go through the patterns of the prefixes and then the meanings. So, agoch, agochi, asoch, ahloch, ayagoch, ayoch, aidnoch, aisnoch, ahnoch, aganoch, ayagnoch, aidioch, aijoch, ahanoch, agunoch, and ayagoch. So those are the changes. It started with agoch or agochi. Um, let's look at these words broken down into kind of color coding. So we have the should, could, or would tense prefix highlighted in pink, and then the pronoun is in red, the root is in black, and then the ending is in blue. So if we look at the prefix, you can pretty much indicate what is the pattern. What is the should, could, or would tense prefix? It's an A or an AE drag. In some cases, it's an AH, but essentially it's an A. So, but I don't want you to think that it's always an A because it's not. It's just generally indicated by an A. For sure the first letter. So, um, so then we have the subjective pronoun, really simple. Remember the root is shared sometimes between the end of the pronoun and the beginning of the suffix. And then we have our ending. And remember the past, future, should, could, or would. You've seen this ending before in the other changes. This is repeated because this is shared. The past, future, should, could, or would are like they're like cousins. They all share like their parents are siblings. Like there's a relation between them, and the I is that relation. Now they're unique because they have different prefixes like wa or caret or a, but they all share the same ending. So that's one thing to be aware of. So for subjective verbs, what are the tense prefixes? This is just to give you an idea of that. The should, could, or would tense will have additional prefixes. The should, could, or would tense is always identified with an A or an AE drag or an AH, but essentially it's an A. So the ending for this word is an I. How do we get our verb conjugation? You have your prefix, you have your pronoun, you have your verb root, and then you have your ending, and that is your verb conjugation. And so the three tenses, past, future, should, could, or would, all share the same ending. Here is the patterning system for just the tense changes. A, AH, AH, just A's, AE drag, AH, A, A-E-drag, and then the rest are A's. So that's important because we use them with our pronouns. So there's really no changes to the pronouns here. Sometimes in the tenses, like the past, future, should, could, or would, the pronouns are going to make some changes, specifically things that start with an L or things that start with a Y. In the O stem, the only instance that that occurs is in Lano. Again, it's the three or more males. The L's changes to an H's. The L changes to an H in that specific spot only, and it becomes Hano. Okay, this is not the case for every single stem. In the A stem, it more than just the three or more males change to an H. Same thing with the C stem, but in the O stem, it's just the three or more males. So this is where understanding those small, unique things go a long way. It just takes practice. You might not remember it at first, but eventually you will. Um, so let's move on. Changes, translations, agoch, agochi. I should, could, or would pull it out. Asoch, you should pull it out. Ahloch, he should pull it out. Okay, remember, we're talking about the tense, should, could, or would. We're talking about the verb, pull it out. We're talking about the subject, who is it? Yago, her. Ayagoch, she should pull it out. Okay, so this is where you're getting all of the meaning because you're understanding what tense we're talking about, should, could, or would, the verb root, pull it out, and the subject, she should pull it out. Ayagoch. That's your translation. It's easy to create a translation when you know all the pieces of the language. Ayoch, it should pull it out. And then so on. You can pause the video just to review the rest of the translations and practice. It's good for practice. But I'm going to continue on. You kind of get the picture here. So I'm going to go to the objective. So ochu, objective. I'm just going to go through the changes here, and then I'll look at the pronouns, and then we'll do the translation. So we have wagochu, zochu, laochu, yagaochu, yaochu, yungnochu, snochu, lonochu, yonochu, yungnochu, yungyochu, Jochu, Lonochu, Yonochu, and Yungyochu. Okay, so those are the changes for the objective. We see some new things here. We have objective pronouns. This is the objective set. We're obviously going to use objective pronouns. We also have a new ending because the objective has its own ending. So objective pronoun is highlighted in red. We have our root word, which is in black, and then our ending, which is just a U. And you say it all the way through. There's no whispered ending for this set. So Wagochu, real simple. Zochu, Laochu, Yagaochu. Now remember, the objective pronouns are a little different than our subjective side, so that's why we have different pronouns. So a lot of times we get used to working on the subjective with verb changes, but eventually we get to the objective, we're like, oh, I forgot about these ones. So it's a refresher. Laochu, Yagaochu, Yaochu, Yunganochu, Snochu, Lonochu, and so on. Real simple, you're just using objective pronouns and making the changes. Oftentimes, I really should only be able to give you the first one, and you can make the rest of the changes based on the pronouns. So, because you have the ending, you understand that this is the objective, and you can make the rest of the changes. So that's another way to kind of challenge yourself. If maybe you cover up these other ones, if you're using the book to follow along, or the slides, the lecture here, the recording, you can just pause or cover up the other ones and just see if you can change them all based on the first one. Give yourself one of them and make the rest of the changes. So there's small, really simple ways to kind of enhance your study skills. What are the meanings for the objective set? Ochu, to pull it out. We'll go chu. In this case, on the objective, it's not happening right now. It's a recent past tense. So we'll go chu is I have pulled it out. It's like it just happened. Zochu, you have pulled it out. Lao chu, he has pulled it out. Recent past tense, it just happened. Yagao chu, she has pulled it out. Yao chu, it has pulled it out. Yunguno chu, me and you, we have pulled it out, and so on. So you could go through the rest of the meanings here. Those are pretty simple, but I just want to emphasize that the meaning and translations here are recent past tense, have done something, have pulled it out. And that translation stays. All you're doing is changing the subject. So it's not anything incredibly difficult. It's pretty easy. So just to kind of reiterate the changes here, we have go choose. That was the first one in the subjective serial. Just we went through the serial. Serial is listed here. Go choose, zo choose, lo choose, ya go choose, yo choose. I'm not going to go through the rest. You can do that on your own, or you can pause it here to do the rest of the pronunciation. And then we also did the past, future, should, could, or would. Just to back up, serial, subjective has its own ending. The past, future, should, could, or would, same ending. They all end in an I. So I'm just going to do the first one of each. We had what gochi, I have pulled it out for the past tense. Ungoch, I will pull it out for the future tense. Agoch, I should or could or would pull it out for the should, could, or would tense. So those are the changes for this set. And then we just did the objective. Wagochu, I have pulled it out. And then the rest of the changes here on the screen. Um, so just to really quickly recap and review this set here, we have the subjective, which we call the serial. That's something happening all the time or right now. In this case, in this verb, it's happening right now. I'm pulling it out. It's subjective pronouns and subjective endings. For the past tense, it's identified with a wa or a way. It's something that happened in the past. I pulled it out. Past, you have to have your past tense prefix to the pronoun, subjective pronouns, your root, and the same ending that's shared between all three tenses. And your future tense is going to be identified with a caret. It's something that is yet to happen or will happen. The future tense, you're going to have to use your future tense prefix, your subjective pronoun, your root, and it's going to have the same ending that's shared with the past and the should, could, or would. And then the last tense of those three is the should, could, or would tense. It's identified with an A or an AE drag, something that might happen, should, could, or would happen. Doesn't mean that's going to happen. It's should, could, or would happen. Um, should, could, or would tense, you have to use your prefix, your tense prefix, your subjective pronoun, your root, and also the same ending. And then the objective is something happening right now or just happened. So you're going to use objective pronouns and your root plus the objective ending. So what do we come up with? We actually end up with 75 changes for that one verb, ochu. So that's a lot. That is very sophisticated, advanced verb conjugations for a language, for the Oneida language. And that is representative of our people. Our people were highly sophisticated people in advanced societies and cultures and um, governing systems and histories and stories. And so that our language is very much a mirror of that. So very cool. These are just to kind of sum up all of the information I shared with you today. But that is about it. What I would do, let me just move around here. I just want to show you a few I would recommend a few study activities. So one of them is to, if you write out all those changes in a notebook, take that chart, say you're using the subjective, cut up all the different changes. So you have one change per sheet of paper. Stick those in an envelope, mix them up, and take them out and put them in order. This is one way, I call it this envelope matching activity. One way to reinforce the pattern. So you're not saying it or writing it yet, you're just reinforcing the pattern. So what I do, or you can use flashcards. You can put one change on every single flashcard, mix them up, put them in order based on the chart. If you have a whiteboard or a wall, tape them to the wall. Um, Another thing you can do to enhance your skills is to write them out. So you can create a blank chart in a notebook like this, like on the screen. You can give yourself the first one or none of them. Either is fine. It's up to you. But I like to give students the first one when they're first starting. So if I give you the first one, go choose, give me all the changes for the rest of them. Well, you need to know certain pieces. You need to know that these are subjective changes. You're using the same ending. You should do the translations at the same time, either writing or in your head, or at least the first one. And that will help you remember these as well. Write them out. Same thing with the past. What goch? I pulled it out. Do all the rest of the changes. See how far you can get. See if your tense prefixes are accurate. Check them back in the book or in this video. Same thing with the future. Ungoch. Give me the rest of the changes. Write them out. Same thing with should, could, or would, a goch, and then also the objective, wagochu. So that's another helpful study tool to do the changes on. So I like to show students kind of this other set. I just do them all back to back, do all the changes, can check them with someone, check them with your book, study with someone else. And then sometimes eventually, if you notice, I give you all the first one for every set. Eventually, I take away the future and should, could, or would, because you actually should make the change. You can make the changes with just the past tense, because remember, it's just the prefix that you're changing. So instead of wa, W-A glottal, it's just a caret. un goch, or an a goch for the Shakur. And then I give you none of them so you can just remember them. So slowly make it more challenging for yourself. That is the whole point. And I think that's it. I guess I would recommend one other small, really a little bit more challenging, but another helpful study tool is if you write every single change out on an index card, um, or a flashcard, mix them up and pull one out. Read it off and do the translation. So if the change says diochu, indicate, okay, that is a objective verb because I know that the objective ends in a U. It doesn't have an S or an I, which is either subjective or the three tenses. And so I know that Joe is you all have pulled it out. There's your translation. Or maybe, and these are other examples too. I just do this with a class. That's why I have them on the screen right now. But maybe you are given the, sorry, oh, it's not on here. Okay, back it up. Let me back it up. My apologies. Um, Maybe you're given just the translation. Maybe it is, um, we have pulled it out, or we pulled it out. Sorry, not we have pulled it out. We pulled it out. And maybe you wrote all the change, write all the translations on cards too, just pull it out. And then if it says we pulled it out, know that that's past tense. And you can make the conjugation based on that change alone because you at some point you've been studying enough that you can do that. So if it's we pulled it out, the change would be we dioch, which is what is on the screen. So we dioch, just you would be able to say that. So those are other helpful study tools for you. Um, Other than that, concludes the virtual lecture for today. Um, and so I just encourage you to use those study suggestions and continue your language learning um, as you continue to um, travel down this journey of language acquisition. So, thank you for watching and learning along. And yeah, that's about it. Togenik. Honokiba.